The alien palace stood high above the shining city, its silver towers cutting into the endless sky. Inside the grand halls, whispers of fear moved like shadows, for their beloved princess was dying. No doctor, no healer, no advanced machine of their empire could stop the strange sickness eating her life away. She was young, beautiful, and strong once, but now she lay weak on her crystal bed, her skin pale, her eyes heavy. Each breath was a struggle, and each hour brought her closer to death. The people outside prayed to their ancient stars, yet hope was fading. A royal guard whispered to another, "If the princess dies, the empire will fall into chaos." The alien emperor walked the halls with a heavy heart, his face hard but his soul breaking. He had sent ships across the galaxy searching for cures, but every answer had ended in failure. Scholars studied ancient records, healers mixed powerful medicines, but nothing touched the disease. It was as if the sickness had been designed to defeat them. The empress sat beside her daughter, holding her cold hand. Tears fell silently, for even the strongest mother could not fight against fate. The princess, though weak, whispered, "Mother, please do not cry." But her words carried no strength, only pain. In the council chamber, voices argued. Some said the princess must be placed in stasis until a cure was found. Others said the empire must prepare for a new ruler. But the emperor slammed his hand against the table, his voice like thunder. "My daughter will not die, not while I still breathe." Yet in his heart, even he feared the truth. For nothing in their mighty empire had power against this unseen enemy. One night, under the pale light of 3 moons, the palace received news of an unusual arrival. A small ship, not from their empire, not from their allies, had fallen from the sky. The guards rushed to the landing site, weapons ready. From the wreckage stepped a strange figure, different from them in every way. A human, alone, lost, yet alive. The human was taken to the palace as a prisoner, for the empire trusted no outsiders. He looked weak compared to the tall aliens, yet there was something in his eyes that spoke of courage. The emperor studied him with suspicion. "Who are you? Why have you come here?" The human replied simply, "I am a traveler. My ship was damaged. I seek no war." While the council wanted to lock him away, the royal physicians noticed something strange. The human had walked through parts of the planet where the disease was strongest, yet he showed no sickness, no weakness. His blood carried something their kind did not have, a natural shield. Whispers spread quickly through the palace. Could this fragile outsider hold the answer? The empress begged the emperor, "Let them test his blood for our daughter's sake." The emperor hesitated, pride and fear battling inside him. To trust a stranger with the fate of his daughter was unthinkable, but to do nothing was to lose her forever. Meanwhile, the princess heard of the human from her mother. Even in her weakness, curiosity stirred within her heart. "What kind of being can survive what kills us?" she whispered. Her eyes, though dim, carried a spark of hope for the first time in many days. The physicians began their work in secret chambers. They compared the human's blood with the sickness. To their amazement, the disease broke apart when faced with his cells. The human's body carried immunity unknown to the galaxy. One healer gasped, This could save her. But danger remained. If the people learned that their princess's life depended on a strange human, unrest would rise. Enemies of the crown would use this truth to weaken the emperor. So the secret was kept hidden, known only to a few. The princess grew weaker with each sunrise, her breath shallow, her body trembling. Time was running out, and the choice became clear. They must risk everything on the human's blood, for in his veins flowed the only hope left for the dying princess. As the council chamber fell into silence, the emperor rose, his voice heavy but firm. "Prepare the treatment. Let this human's immunity be tested. If the stars have sent him, then perhaps fate has not abandoned us after all." In her chamber, the princess closed her eyes, unaware that her destiny was about to change forever, unaware that a fragile outsider from a distant world would become her savior, and unaware that their meeting would shake the galaxy itself. The night grew colder. The moons cast long shadows over the palace. And in the darkness, a story of survival and unlikely hope began. The palace guards dragged the human through the shining corridors, their tall frames towering over his smaller body. Chains clinked at his wrists, yet his steps did not falter. He had crossed galaxies, fought storms of space, and now stood in the heart of an empire that saw him as nothing more than a fragile intruder. Whispers followed him through every hall. Is this the one who walked through the sickness unharmed? He looks weak. How can such a creature hold any cure? The aliens' voices carried doubt, fear, and quiet anger. To them, this human was an insult to their pride. How could their mighty empire need the help of such a small outsider? The emperor ordered him placed in the council chamber, where the high lords waited. They sat in a circle of silver thrones, their glowing eyes fixed on the stranger. The air was heavy with judgment. One lord spat. This thing should be executed before it infects us with more danger. Another whispered. No, he may be the answer the physician spoke of. The emperor raised his hand for silence. Speak, human. Tell us who you are and why fate has delivered you here. The human's voice was calm, though he felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. My name is Daniel. I am a traveler. I came not to bring harm, but to survive. His words were simple, yet carried strength. He did not kneel, he did not beg. He only stood as one man who refused to break. The empress entered quietly, her eyes carrying sorrow. She looked upon Daniel not as an enemy, but as a possibility. She had seen what the physicians discovered. His blood was different, a shield against the very sickness that was killing her daughter. Still, she knew convincing the council would not be easy. These proud lords hated the idea of placing their princess's fate in the hands of a human. Daniel was taken to a chamber of crystal walls, where alien healers examined him. They pierced his skin with silver needles, drew his blood, and studied it under glowing instruments. Their alien symbols danced across the walls as results appeared. One physician whispered in awe, "It resists the sickness completely, it destroys it." But others frowned. "It could be dangerous to transfer such blood into our kind. It may poison her instead." Daniel listened in silence, his mind caught between fear and resolve. He had never asked to be here, never sought to be anyone's savior. Yet when he heard of the dying princess, something in him stirred. He remembered his own sister back on Earth, who had once lain on a hospital bed with no cure. The memory of helplessness burned in him, and he whispered to himself, "Not again, not this time." That night, while guards kept watch, Daniel was taken secretly to the princess's chamber. The empress had commanded it, for she wanted her daughter to see the one who might save her. The doors opened softly, and Daniel stepped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of medicine and sorrow. The princess lay still, her silver hair spread like a river over the pillows, her chest rising with shallow breaths. When her eyes opened, faint but clear, they met Daniel's. For a moment, time seemed to pause. She saw not a warrior, not a hero, but a simple man, tired, scarred, yet alive. Her lips moved slowly. "You are the human." Her voice was weak, but her gaze held curiosity. Daniel bowed his head slightly. "I am." The princess studied him with fading strength. "How do you stand when others fall? Why does the sickness not touch you?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know, but if my body can help, I will not turn away." The words reached her heart like a distant light. For days she had listened to nothing but silence and sorrow. Now, for the first time, she heard a voice that promised hope. But not everyone shared this hope. In the shadows of the palace, whispers of betrayal grew louder. Some lords plotted in secret, fearing that if a human saved the princess, their power would weaken. They said to each other, "If the cure comes from him, then the people will worship him, not us." Their pride burned hotter than their loyalty, and in the darkness, seeds of treachery began to grow. Daniel remained unaware of these plots. He sat quietly in his chamber, staring out at the alien moons. He did not know why fate had placed him here, but he knew one truth. He could not watch another life fade without trying, even if it meant risking his own. As dawn broke, the Emperor called the council once again. The healers stood before them with evidence glowing on crystal tablets. The human's blood resists the sickness completely. It can be used, they declared. The chamber fell silent, every eye turning to the Emperor. At last, his voice rang out, steady but heavy with the weight of decision. Begin the treatment. Let us see if the stars have indeed sent this man to save my daughter. The council erupted with voices of doubt and anger. Some demanded caution, others cried for action. But the Emperor's command was final. The fate of the princess, and perhaps the fate of the empire, now rested on the blood of a single human. And as the treatment prepared to begin, unseen eyes watched from the shadows. Eyes filled not with hope, but with the fire of betrayal. For not everyone wished to see the princess saved, and not everyone would allow a human to change the destiny of their world. The human encounter had begun, and with it, the first sparks of conflict that would either save or destroy them all. The great halls of the alien palace trembled with tension. The order had been given. The human's blood would be used to try and save the dying princess. But the decision was not one of unity. It was one born of desperation. Half the council believed in the chance. The other half whispered that it was madness. The Emperor sat upon his high throne, staring into the shadows of the chamber. His face was carved with stone-like resolve, yet in his eyes burned the fear of a father. He had ruled star systems, commanded fleets across the galaxy. Yet here he was, helpless before a sickness that had defeated their greatest science. Only the fragile human stood between his daughter and death. Daniel stood at the center of the council, surrounded by alien guards whose hands never left their weapons. He felt the weight of their stares, the distrust that hung in the air like a storm. One lord hissed, "You risk poisoning her with the blood of an outsider." Another shouted, "If this fails, we lose not only the princess, but our pride as well." But the Empress rose and silenced them with her calm, yet commanding voice. "Our daughter is fading with every breath. If we do nothing, she dies. If this human holds even a spark of hope, we must try." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He had never stood before alien kings and queens, never carried such weight. He was no hero, no chosen warrior, only a man who wanted to do what was right. Still, he raised his voice, steady though it trembled beneath. "I cannot promise miracles. I cannot promise safety, but if my blood can help her, I will give it." The chamber fell silent. Even the Emperor, cold and proud, looked at Daniel with something almost like respect. The gamble had begun. In the healing chambers, alien machines surrounded the princess's bed, glowing with strange energy. The physicians worked in silence, preparing the human's blood. They infused it with careful precision, adjusting it so it would not clash with her alien body. Every step was a risk, every breath a prayer. Daniel lay on a table beside her, tubes drawing his blood. He watched as it flowed through crystal channels, glowing faintly under alien light before being transferred to the princess. His mind wandered back to Earth, to the sister he had lost years ago. He remembered holding her hand as doctors said they could do nothing more. Now fate had given him another chance, not to save his sister, but to save someone else's. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Hold on, princess." The first infusion began. The princess stirred weakly, her body trembling as the human blood entered her veins. Her skin glowed faintly, her breathing sharp, then shallow, then still. The physicians froze in fear. The Empress gasped and clutched her daughter's hand. "Stay with me, please." Daniel sat up despite the needles in his arms, his voice breaking. "Don't stop, trust it, give it time." Minutes passed like hours. The machines beeped. The physicians argued in panic. Some said it was killing her. Others begged to continue. The emperor raised his hand. Enough. We will see this through. If she dies, let her die fighting. Then a miracle. The princess's breathing deepened, her chest rising with strength unseen in days. Her pale skin warmed, color returned slowly to her face. Her weak pulse grew stronger. Gasps filled the chamber as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. The human's blood was working, but even as hope bloomed, shadows gathered in secret. A group of lords watched from hidden corridors, their faces twisted in anger. One snarled, "If this succeeds, the empire will forever be tied to him." Another growled, "Our people will bow to a human, and the blood of outsiders will stain our throne." They vowed in whispers, "Better she dies than our empire bows to his kind." Daniel did not know of the plots forming against him. All he knew was the sight of the princess opening her eyes, weak yet alive. Her gaze met his across the room, faint but filled with something new. "Hope," she whispered softly, "you gave me strength." And for the first time, her voice did not sound like it was fading into death. The empress wept openly, her hands trembling as she kissed her daughter's forehead. The emperor stood silent, yet inside his chest the unyielding weight of fear began to lift. The council murmured in disbelief. Some praised the human as a miracle, others cursed him as a threat. But none could deny the truth. The gamble had worked. Yet Daniel felt no triumph, only exhaustion. He knew this was only the beginning. The princess was not fully cured. The sickness still lingered within her. The human blood had slowed it, weakened it, but more would be needed. The treatment must continue, and with every drop of his blood, his own life would grow weaker. It was a desperate gamble not only for the princess, but for him as well. And in the shadows, where betrayal and jealousy brewed, another gamble was already being planned. One that would threaten not only Daniel's life, but the fragile hope that had just begun to shine in the empire. The palace had grown quiet after the first treatment. Whispers of a miracle spread through the silver halls, carried from guard to servant, from servant to citizen. The princess, once thought lost, had opened her eyes, and hope flickered again like fire in the cold night. But it was only the beginning, for the sickness was not yet gone. Her survival now rested on the fragile bond between her and the human whose blood flowed in her veins. Daniel was kept under guard at all times, watched as though he were both a savior and a prisoner. He was given a chamber of polished stone and crystal walls, beautiful yet locked from within. Every morning healers came, drawing more of his blood, studying it, preparing it for the princess. With each day, his body grew weaker, yet he did not complain. He had promised himself he would not watch another life fade while he had the power to help. The princess, though still frail, began to recover small pieces of her strength. She could sit upright for moments, her breaths no longer shallow gasps but careful, steady rhythms. Her attendants whispered prayers of gratitude, but she ignored their praises. Her eyes often turned toward the door, toward the thought of the strange human who was giving pieces of his own life for hers. At last, the empress arranged for them to meet again. The chamber doors opened, and Daniel stepped inside, pale from the constant blood loss, yet standing tall. The princess looked at him, her silver hair resting on her shoulders, her voice soft but stronger than before. "You came again," she said, almost like a question. Daniel gave a small smile. "I said I would not turn away." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Two lives from different worlds, tied now by survival itself. The princess studied him, her gaze curious, almost disbelieving. "You give your life for mine, though you owe me nothing. Why?" Daniel paused, his voice quiet but steady. "Because no one should face death alone, not if I can help it." Her lips curved faintly, the closest thing to a smile she had shown in weeks. She whispered, strange words from a strange man, but something in her chest stirred, something she thought she had lost when the sickness first touched her. Hope. Day after day, Daniel and the princess shared brief moments. Sometimes only a few words, sometimes quiet silence. But in those moments a fragile bond began to grow. She told him of her empire, of the stars her people once conquered. He told her of Earth, of oceans and forests, of skies filled with birds instead of warships. Her laughter was weak, but real, as she said, "Your world sounds like a dream." He answered, "So does yours," though in truth he thought her world was a cage of power and fear. But outside their chamber, danger brewed. The lords who despised Daniel watched with growing hatred. They whispered of weakness, of corruption. If the princess ties herself to him, the empire will bow to a human, they said. Some spoke of assassination, others of exile. Their plots grew sharper, their knives hidden in shadows. One night, Daniel was attacked. A blade flashed in the darkness of his chamber. He fought back with nothing but his bare hands, surviving only because a guard loyal to the Empress arrived in time. Blood stained the floor, not only his but that of the assassin. When word reached the princess, she demanded to see him. Her attendants begged her to rest, but she insisted, her voice filled with rare fire. "Bring him to me now." When Daniel entered her chamber, bandaged and tired, the princess's eyes filled with anger. "They try to kill you," she whispered. "They fear you more than they fear death." Daniel sat beside her, his voice calm. "They fear change, not me, and fear makes enemies reckless." She reached for his hand, her fingers weak yet steady. "You risked your life for me, and now they take aim at you." Her voice trembled. "I will not let them take you from me." For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of her words. It was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about a bond that neither of them had expected. Two strangers from different stars, yet bound together by the same fight against death. The Empress watched silently from the corner of the room. She saw the way her daughters' eyes followed Daniel, the way Daniel's presence gave her strength. And though fear still lived in her heart, she allowed herself a fragile smile. Perhaps this bond, this strange connection, was not weakness. Perhaps it was the very strength her daughter needed to live. But in the shadows of the empire, knives were still being sharpened. For not everyone wished to see the bond of survival turn into something greater. And as the princess grew stronger, so too did the dangers surrounding them both. The empire's palace glowed under the light of its 3 moons, but inside its walls, shadows moved with quiet hatred. The miracle of the princess's recovery should have united the council, but instead, it tore them apart. Some saw Daniel as a savior sent by fate, while others whispered that he was a poison wrapped in flesh, a danger greater than the sickness itself. In hidden chambers, the lords gathered in secret, their voices sharp like blades. One said, "If the people learn their princess lives because a human, their loyalty to us will weaken." Another replied, "Already the citizens speak his name in whispers. They call him a gift from the stars." A third slammed his fist. "Then we must remind them, he is no gift, he is a threat, and if he lives, he will reshape the empire itself." Plots thickened, promises of betrayal whispered in the darkness. Some spoke of assassins, others of poisons, and still others of turning the guard against him. But one plan grew louder than the rest. Expose him as a danger to the princess herself. If he fails, if his blood falters, the people will turn on him, and we'll be free of this shame, they agreed. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to give what he could. Each day his body grew weaker, his skin pale, his strength fading. Yet every drop of blood gave the princess new life. She now walked short distances, her voice steady, her eyes bright with determination. She no longer looked like the fragile figure waiting for death. She looked like a leader reborn. The people began to notice. Crowds gathered outside the palace walls, chanting prayers of thanks. Some whispered of the human sacrifice, calling him a hero. But the council twisted these whispers into fear. "Do you not see," they told the citizens, "this outsider drains his life into our princess. What happens when his weakness infects her strength?" Doubt grew, and with doubt came unrest. Inside the palace, the emperor called a council once more. Daniel stood at the edge of the chamber, still chained, his body fragile, but his eyes unyielding. The emperor's voice was thunder. My daughter lives because of him, and yet you question his place? One lord rose, his voice sharp. She lives now, but for how long? What if his blood carries dangers we cannot see? What if he enslaves her with it? Murmurs filled the hall, suspicion spreading like fire. The princess herself entered, walking slowly but with her head held high. Her presence silenced the room. She looked at the council, her voice strong. This man has given his life for mine, when all of you had already buried me in your hearts. Her gaze cut through them like a blade. You call him weak, yet he has shown more strength than any of you. Her words struck deep, but not everyone bowed to them. Some lords smiled in silence, their minds already twisting new plans. To them, her defense of the human was not loyalty, but weakness they could exploit. That night, Daniel was escorted back to his chamber. But before the doors could close, a loyal guard whispered to him, "Be careful, stranger. There are those who want you gone, and not even the emperor can protect you forever." Daniel nodded, though he had already felt the sharpness of their hatred. He knew the bond he shared with the princess was more than survival. It was becoming a threat to those who clung to power. The empress visited him in secret, her voice filled with worry. "You have saved my daughter, but in doing so, you have drawn enemies from every shadow." Daniel answered softly, "If my life must be risked again, I will not hesitate." The empress studied him, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. For she knew that if the lords succeeded in destroying him, they would destroy her daughter's hope as well. The days grew darker. Unrest began to spread in the city, where rumors twisted like snakes. Some shouted that the human was a hero. Others claimed he was a curse. Crowds clashed, voices rose, and the empire teetered between gratitude and rebellion. In the council chamber, betrayal finally took form. A secret message was sent to the emperor's rivals in distant stars. If you wish to see the empire weakened, strike now, for its bloodline is bound to a fragile human. The message traveled in silence, unseen, unstoppable, and with it came the promise of war. Daniel, unaware of the storm gathering outside, focused only on the princess. Her strength returned more each day, and with it came a bond between them that neither could deny. She no longer called him just the human, but spoke his name softly, as though it carried weight in her heart. Daniel, though weary, felt the same. He had come to care for her life not out of duty, but out of something deeper. Yet with every shared word, every shared look, the knives in the shadows grew sharper. The bond that gave her life was the very bond that threatened to tear the empire apart. And soon, betrayal would step out of the shadows. No longer whispers in the dark, but blades in the open. For in a world of pride and power, love and survival could not exist without blood. The empire stood on the edge of chaos. The princess was stronger now, her steps no longer trembling, her voice carrying command. But as her strength returned, so too did the hatred of those who feared her bond with the human. The whispers of betrayal had become plans, and the plans now turned into action. Daniel felt the change first. The palace no longer watched him with curiosity, but with open hostility. Guards once silent now muttered when he passed, their hands tightening on their weapons. Even servants looked away, fearful of being seen near him. It was as if a shadow followed him wherever he walked. The princess noticed too. One evening, as she looked out over the glowing city, she spoke quietly to Daniel. "They want you gone, some because they fear you, others because they hate what you've given me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And what have I given you?" She turned her gaze to him, her silver eyes shining. "Hope," she whispered, "something they no longer control." That night, the turning point came. Daniel was walking back to his chamber under heavy guard when the attack struck. From the shadows, assassins moved swift as blades of light. They struck the guards first, weapons piercing armor, cutting through silver halls like thunder. Daniel was dragged back, his heart pounding. He had no weapon, no strength, only the instinct to survive. The assassins' faces were masked, their voices filled with venom. "Human, your blood has poisoned our empire. Tonight it spills for the last time." They lunged toward him, but Daniel fought with raw desperation. He grabbed a fallen guard's staff, blocking strikes, shoving back with all the force his weary body could summon. He had fought before in his life, but never against killers from another world. Their movements were faster, sharper, alien in every sense. The alarm rang through the palace. The princess heard it first, her heart racing as she demanded to know what had happened. When she was told assassins had targeted the human, she ignored the pleas of her attendants. She rushed through the halls herself, her strength returning faster than anyone had believed. By the time she arrived, Daniel was bleeding, his body pressed against the wall as assassins closed in. "Stop!" Her voice echoed through the chamber like fire. The assassins froze, not out of fear, but out of hesitation. No one had expected the princess to arrive. Her eyes burned with fury as she stepped forward, her fragile body now standing with the strength of a ruler. "If you strike him, you strike me," she declared. The assassins hesitated for a breath, then turned their blades toward her. To them, she was already tainted by the human's blood, unworthy of the throne. Daniel's body screamed in pain, but his heart surged with fire. He would not let them touch her, not while he still breathed. With a roar, he surged forward, staff in hand, blocking the blade, aimed for her chest. The strike cut deep into his arm, but he stood firm. The princess gasped, reaching toward him, but he shouted, "Stay back." The emperor's guards finally arrived, steel and fire filling the halls. The assassins were forced to retreat, vanishing back into the shadows from which they came. But the damage was done. Blood stained the marble floors, Daniel's blood, the same blood that had saved the princess's life. He collapsed to his knees, his vision blurring. The princess caught him before he could fall, her arms trembling as she held him. "You fool," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Why do you keep risking yourself?" Daniel's breath was heavy, his voice weak. "Because if I can protect you, then my life still means something." The empress arrived, her eyes wide with fear. She saw her daughter clutching the wounded human, and for the first time, she understood their bond was no longer just survival. It was loyalty, it was trust, and perhaps it was love. But around them, the council's whispers turned to open shouts. "See what he brings? Chaos, blood, betrayal. The empire bleeds because of him." The emperor silenced them with a roar. "My daughter lives because of him, and he has shed his blood to protect her. You speak of betrayal? Look to your own shadows, for it was our lords who sent blades against him, not our enemies." The chamber fell silent, but the truth was clear. The empire was divided, and Daniel stood at the heart of it. That night, as the princess sat beside Daniel's bed, watching him recover, she whispered, "They will never stop, not while you live." Daniel opened his eyes slowly, meeting her gaze. "Then we don't run, we fight," he said softly. Her heart raced at his words, for she knew the turning point had come. No longer was this about survival. It was about defiance, about standing together against those who would tear them apart. And in the shadows of the galaxy, the message of betrayal that had been sent to distant rivals finally reached its destination. Armies began to stir, fleets preparing for war. The Empire's enemies had heard of the human who saved their princess, and they saw it not as hope, but as weakness to be destroyed. The turning point had come, and the storm that followed would decide the fate of them all. The Palace of Silver Towers no longer felt like a place of safety. Its shining walls echoed with fear, betrayal, and the cries of a people divided. The assassination attempt had failed, but the wound it left behind was deeper than blood. The Empire was no longer united, and the galaxy had begun to watch. Beyond the stars, fleets stirred, hungry for weakness. Enemies who had once bowed to the Empire now whispered, If their princess depends on a human to live, then their throne is fragile, their rule broken, ships gathered in secret, war drums beating in silence. The empire stood on the edge of invasion, and the choice of survival came down to one fragile bond. Daniel recovered slowly, his body scarred but unbroken. The princess never left his side, her hand often resting in his. Their bond, born of blood and survival, had become something stronger, something undeniable. They no longer needed words to understand one another. Hope itself had tied them together. But the council was restless. Some demanded Daniel be cast out to prove the empire's pride. Others whispered that only his presence could save them now. The emperor called them to silence, his voice shaking the chamber. You speak of pride while enemies gather at our gates. You speak of fear while my daughter breathes because of this man. The time has come to choose, not between him and us, but between survival and destruction. The princess rose beside him, no longer weak, her voice carrying strength like steel. This human gave his blood for me, while you gave only words. If we deny him now, we deny the stars themselves. Our empire must not fear what is different. We must rise with it, or we will fall. Her words spread beyond the council, carried by servants, guards, and citizens alike. The people began to chant not only for their princess, but for the human who had saved her. And when voices rise together, even the proudest lords cannot silence them. The storm came soon after. Enemy fleets descended on the outer worlds, their weapons burning across skies. The empire's armies prepared, but fear rippled through their ranks. Would their weakened throne be enough to inspire victory? Daniel stood at the center of the storm. He was not a soldier, not a general, but his presence had become a symbol. Wherever he walked, the people whispered, "The man who saved her." And hope, fragile but powerful, spread like fire. The emperor made his choice. He stood before the council and declared, "The human is no longer our prisoner, nor our burden. He is our ally, and if we are to survive, we will fight beside him." The declaration split the chamber, but the decision was final. In the days that followed, Daniel and the princess stood together before the people. Her hand resting in his, her voice strong. "We are not weak because of him," she declared. "We are stronger than ever. The galaxy will see not a dying empire, but a reborn one, built on unity, not pride alone." The people roared their approval, and in that moment, Daniel realized the truth. He was no longer an outsider. He had become part of something greater than himself. Not through power, not through conquest, but through sacrifice. The war came swift and merciless. Enemy ships rained fire, but the Empire's fleets fought back with renewed strength. For they did not fight only for survival, but for a bond that had given them new purpose. The princess commanded with fire in her eyes, Daniel beside her, a symbol of defiance. Together, they inspired a galaxy that had nearly lost hope. The enemies who thought the Empire weak were forced to retreat. Their fleets scattered, their voices silenced. And when the last battle ended, the stars themselves seemed brighter. In the quiet that followed, Daniel stood with the princess on the balcony of the palace. The city below glowed with life, the people cheering their names. The princess looked at him, her voice soft. "You came to us by accident, a broken ship, a fragile man. Yet you became the reason I live, the reason my people still stand." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes tired but alive. "I only did what I could," he said, "no more, no less." She reached for his hand, her touch steady and warm. "You gave me life," she whispered, "and I will spend mine, making sure you never stand alone again." And so a new alliance was born, not written in treaties or carved in a stone, but written in blood, in sacrifice, and in the bond between a human and a princess. An alliance that would change the galaxy forever. For where there had been death, there was now life. Where there had been fear, there was now courage. And where there had been loneliness, there was now hope. The alien princess had been dying, But in her darkest hour, a human's strange immunity saved her life. And in doing so, saved an empire. The stars themselves would remember this tale. A story not of power or pride, but of survival, trust, and the bond that turned weakness into strength.